below and subscribe to my channel. And if you really want to help me out with that IVF, that's in vitro fertilization, that my husband and I are planning to have a baby with, you know what to do. It's down below are the links. I've got a Patreon account and I'm selling everything I can think of on eBay. All the links are below, and your support is greatly desired and I'm very thankful for it. Assalamu alaikum and happy 2022, happy new year, whatever you want to call it. This is my first podcast of the year. Glad you could join me. This is Jenna Loves Allah, and I hope you do too. Anyway, it's a big bismillah that everything I have to say to you today finds you in grace, and that you take from it something that can help you in some way, hopefully. Thank you for joining me. Today I want to first reflect. Usually I talk a lot about my husband, so family issues and how the community, being a revert, my different takes on what I've found with my community interactions and stuff like that. But today I want to talk about individualism, because I see in the world today some serious threats to individualism, especially to our ability to think for ourselves or express our thoughts. There's been a ton of one-sided presentation of the global narrative, let's put it. Basically, we don't get to see both sides of a story. We get one side, and whenever somebody tries to give another side, we're hit with ideas that it's misinformation. The whole idea of misinformation is heinous because it assumes that we're all too stupid to be able to take any information given to us and decide for ourselves that it is or isn't truthful. And it also allows for the fact that somebody else is deciding what is true and what is not true, and you have that ability taken away from you. So it's a very, very bad thing. But to get back to the individual, when you have everything villainized that doesn't follow a certain mindset, what happens is that we start to create this overwhelming unity of thought. And although that sounds good on the outside, that's not how we were created. We are created with all kinds of wonderful, special uniquenesses, differences on how we react to different things. Our different experiences allow us to absorb things in different ways, and each and every little bits of individuality are what make us special and what give us something unique to offer back to the world. It's what helps us grow when we come together within our families and our communities. Because if everything's the same, you get stagnant behavior. So like a stagnant still water that doesn't move, it just becomes putrid and decays. Whereas when you have this bubbly, gurgly water that's moving because there's so much going on in it, it's alive. And we're not when we all conform to one thing, because it's not how we were created. It's not how we were meant to be. Unfortunately, it's more machine-like, easier to control, and that's what the powers that be seem to be hell-bent on doing to us all. So I'd like to take this as an opportunity to kind of talk to you about how we can start to see the pitfalls in the way information is presented to us, and start to analyze things for ourselves, and start to learn how to make our own guided decisions and judgment on things. One of the first things to look for when you are told something in the media is how much of what you are told is given as factual information, like specifics as to who, what, why, when, where, how much, things like that. And how much of it is adjective driven, things that elicit an emotional response, especially a negative emotional response. Because the more negative emotion that is generated by something, the more that's going to stay with you. It's going to eat at you. It's going to make you feel miserable. It's going to make you remember. It's going to make you dwell on it. And it's going to make you either fearful, which makes you very easy to control, or hateful, which makes you something that works against everything that does not hold to that narrative. It's like when you become a part of that group think that they're working on, and you see everything, you begin to think like the group mind. You see everything that doesn't conform with you as being vilified, as being something that is now evil, something that you want to get rid of. And in reality, what you've done is you've chopped up a piece of yourself that really you need. And because that's missing, you resent everything that reminds you of that, because your body, soul, whatever, is craving to have that part of yourself back. And we have to be very much aware of this, because it creates conflict in our home life. It creates conflict in our interpersonal relationships. And when they divide us, they conquer us, they can control us very easily. And that's the objective here. So it's not my objective. My objective is to reach out and help you to grow and be the best, strongest person you can be. And it doesn't matter what your basic skill set or intellectual ability is. All it takes is a little bit of reflection, trust that God has all that has planned the best thing out for you, trust in Him that He'll make things all right, and not to get all worked up and fearful of the things around you, because He's got it all under control. And we can't add a moment to our lives anyway, so we shouldn't be concerned with the things that we have no control over, and we should focus on the delightful things and wonderful things in our lives and try to pursue those instead of letting our mind dwell upon the negative things. And when they work us in this group mindset with all the different social medias, regular medias, everything else, they are really chipping away at those things in our lives, because our nature is to dwell on the things that are bad and forget the things that bring us joy and happiness. So we've got to turn around and count those little blessings and try to focus on the good things. Or at the very least, identify what's bad and walk away from it. So that is where I would like to leave you today. Take a look at things, and it's not only about the adjectives versus the facts. Does it elicit some sort of emotional response? If you were to take an article, let's say, that you've read, or you're sitting through a vlog or something, and somebody is using a whole bunch of adjectives that are upsetting you, it's easier with the written word, but if you were to take all those adjectives out, what would that story be saying? What would it have that same impact on you? Would your response be the same? If you can cut away all that and still have a stronger response, then there may be some truth in it. But if when you cut away all that, your response is dwindled extensively, then somebody's manipulating you. And we have to look out for these things. There's a lot of ways stuff is done. There's a lot of different factors. Quite often when they quote numbers, they'll quote really big numbers, or they'll take things that are out of context, where they'll say something like, so many 100 people are dying from something, and it just sounds like this really large number, but in reality, it's actually that the percentage has gone down since the year before, but they don't make any kind of indication as to what the year before was. They just throw this big number out at you to terrify you. Or they take something that the percentage actually of people surviving is really large, but they never tell you how much that is. They just say, like 29% of so-and-so gets, that contracts this, dies from it. And it's like, well, that means that all these other people don't. You have to always try to take whatever number or value they give you and look at the opposite side of that. So what does that also mean? And sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. One of the things I came across recently when I was putting together some information for another article was that the reading comprehension in America is absolutely atrocious. It's been decreasing annually amongst college graduates, their ability to understand what was written at the college graduate level was dismal. As of the early 90s, only 40% of graduates actually were reading with comprehension at their grade level. So that meant that over half of the people that graduated did not actually have the skill set that somebody, say, in the 50s would have had with that same education. So it meant that the educational certificate had actually been devalued. Kind of like inflation. The money's been devalued, so you've got this negative effect on things. Unfortunately, that number has gone and gotten worse. In 2003, they did it again, and it had dropped down to 31% from 40%. So only 31% of the people could actually function at the level that they were graduating at, which meant that almost 70% of everybody graduating could not understand the reading level for which they had a certificate declaring that, yes, they are, they've learned these things. And that's only gotten worse. And you see it reflected in every study they've done on every age group across the board. And it really begs to question when you get these so-called experts and specialists and even doctors, if they're coming from a younger age group, did they get the same education that somebody who's been around for a while got? I'm not sure that that's true. Of course, there's always that small percentage that did, that were diligent and worked. But you've got to determine now that somebody actually has the true credentials that they've been given. Because that little piece of paper that says that they've gone to school and graduated and gives them the authority to call themselves something doesn't really mean what it used to. It doesn't have that same authority as it used to because there's so many people that are missing the bar. They don't understand what it is that they're reading and writing. And it's even worse, apparently, when it comes to understanding documents. And those documents might be government documents, they might be scientific documents. That means when the numbers and stuff are all thrown in there, they can't analyze what that information is saying. So the reading comprehension on itself isn't up to snuff. But when it comes to understanding where there are numbers and concepts and everything all thrown in, it's even a worse reality for what they understand. And in a world that is extremely scientifically based, or at least all of our thoughts of progress and control and the things that they use to pull us one way or this way or that and manipulate our actions come from the scientific community, you have to ask yourself, are these experts true and valuable? What kind of studies are they doing? Are those studies actually free of bias? Are they actually something that shows true scientific study, something that has a sampling size which isn't too small, that has enough, that isn't too homogeneous, which means that if everybody comes from the same sort of group, it doesn't represent, or subgroup, it doesn't represent the populace as a whole. So let's say they were doing a study on how certain people reacted to a certain vitamin, and they only studied white males. Well, the effect of that vitamin might be different on females, or it might be different on somebody from a different genetic background. We don't know until all the different parameters have been studied as extensively. So we try to get a group that is large enough to represent the entire population, so that if we have 1,000 individuals that are looked at, and say 10% of the real population is Hemophiliacs, it's not, but I'm just picking something. And they're looking to see if this has a significant effect on regular people versus hemophiliacs. You could compare these two groups because you have 10% of your 1,000 people are hemophiliac and 10% of the real population is hemophiliac. So you can say, okay, when we get all these people together, it represents the same populace. Now I'm just giving crazy examples that I'm pulling off the top of my head, and don't quote me on any of those specific numbers because I'm just giving it as an example to try to explain how things work. But you can look up any demographics chart for any city, any country, anything like that. They're all over the internet, and it'll give you a breakdown of geopolitical information, of age information, of gender information, of diseases, of genetic background. Everything is all there because all those different aspects may have an effect on the outcome of a scientific study. And when you only grab a certain group of the populace and test them, it's not really viable. It's one of the reasons why when they do a study for a new medication, for instance, they always test middle-aged men that are healthy. But then what they've got to do is they've got to grab a group that actually is representative of the population that has whatever disease they want to treat and test them. Because even though the drug might show up in healthy men, it's not going to show its effects on the people that have the particular problem that they want to treat unless they actually grab that sample of people and test them with the actual drug. So to put the drug on healthy people isn't going to show you the true effect of the drug. It'll only show you if the drug gets taken into the bloodstream or not and how long it lasts there and stuff like that, which is a little bit of information, but doesn't tell you if the drug is effective for what they want it for. And it might give you some possible side effects, but that's a whole nother ballpark because a lot of people are paid to do these studies and they get kicked out of the studies if they report any symptoms. That means that they don't always give all their reactions to the medications because that would mean they'd lose out on their money, and it's desperate people that do these things. So it's a whole nother problem, and unfortunately a lot of studies and stuff are done like this today. So what I'm getting at basically is that you can't just take everything that's told to you every day at its surface value. You've got to do a little bit of due diligence and try to find out if the sources of the information are true. If they quote sources, follow them up, follow them down the train, find out, if they quoted a study and there was like 20 people in it, or even 100 for that matter, it's probably not representative of a true entire population. That's just not enough people to take as a sampling. We're not doing a study to know what is the favorite color of jelly beans amongst fourth graders. I mean, we're doing studies that are more viable and more important, and just picking one class of people isn't going to do it. So, and this is for everything. You can't take things at face value, so you've got to look to see if you're trying to be manipulated through the use of adjectives, through the use of tactics that excite you and get you worked up and stuff like that, because the more they elicit an emotional response, the more it's going to stay with you. Particularly so for the negative responses, because they tend to hang on longer. Although you can have it done with positivity too, it just rarely is. And we are given a responsibility to think for ourselves because we are given the gift of our own minds. And when we fail to use them and we let someone else do the thinking for us, that's when atrocities start. Because someone else starts to control what is deemed good and what is deemed bad. And they start to control our behaviors by telling us, okay, now this person doesn't fit in, they're evil, and then we start to attack them, those other people, and don't give them a chance to speak their mind, to tell their own truth, to reveal their own experiences. And this can hide people who would do you wrong, who would use you as their pawns in a very dark reality. I'm not saying that we are doomed to this dark reality. I'm saying that if we look to always be responsible for our own actions, because it's really all we can ever control, then we have a better chance of not being used as somebody's pawn. And if we find ourselves where we've been duped by something for some reason, somebody's lied to you, you believe them, and now you feel cheated, you could be mad at them, that's fine. You could be mad at yourself, that's okay too. But learn from it. Don't make the same mistake and move on. Tell whoever else that you may have spread that falseness onto because you wholeheartedly believed that what was told to you was true, and make amends for that. And that's how we grow, and that's how we learn, and that's how we become the best people we can be. And I guess that's it for now. Hopefully this gets your year off to a good start. I know it's not like super energy or even super positive to that effect, but it's all about perspective. I mean, you can take this and be very, very positive with it. I'm giving you little tools that you can use to help to develop your own mind and your own cognitive way of looking at the world and seeing the bigger picture, instead of just taking everything that's thrown at you and just absorbing it like a sponge. We're not sponges, we're people. And people are reactive and people are interactive. And maybe what we need is to have a little more real life interaction, a little less clickety-click, and then we'll get a lot more of that gut feeling and vibe. Because you can't get a gut feeling off of this kind of interaction. Your gut feeling comes from real life stuff and real life experience, and you get duped a lot less when you've got all aspects of body language, the smell of fear, everything else that goes on when somebody's trying to lie to you. You can't catch that in a media feed. So do your best to interact live with people, to talk to people about what's important in your lives, and just have a good one. Until next time,